Yep, that's Foot Carl and Felix, but today I want to talk about handgunners. The reason I brought Foot Carl and Felix is so that they could be kind of a little fighty duo and bring lots and lots of guns, so you guys don't actually see me use handgunners all that often. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of them. I tend to favor other infantry skirmish units for the Empire, but don't get me wrong, they're a nice tool in certain matchups. They definitely have some advantages, and today I decided to go with a little bit of a different build, what I would normally do. No heavy cavalry, we've just got the 2-foot characters, and 8 guns, basically 4 outriders and 4 handguns, Lore of Deathcaster, and 8 spears, basically, right? 4 halberds, 4 spearmen with shields. Rider of Rohan, my opponent here, he's got a pretty solid, what I would consider kind of on-point build. The Forsaken are an interesting choice, one of which is getting blasted by outriders on the far side. Big Bird, double Manticore, bunch of Marauder throwing axes, which do have a missile block chance. The Javelins and Horsemasters do not. He's got 1 great weapon, Chaos Warrior, 1 Chosen Halberd, Marauders, Forsaken, so decent. Going to throw a final transmutation here, which is pretty solid. It's going to do some damage kind of on this blob, but probably better to save that until the characters kind of blob up and use it on them, potentially. I don't really have any cav to use it on, which is probably what you bring it for, honestly, like demis and stuff. But yeah, the handguns right now just blending this Forsaken, turning them literally into Swiss cheese. The reason I'm not the biggest fan of handgunners is kind of this reason right here. In comparison to something like War Wagons or Outriders, they're much harder to protect from literally everything. Manticore's coming down, getting a quick terror out, and popping back up into the air. I'm going to be focusing the Manticores, and we managed to focus the one into an Enrage into some spears, which is exactly what we're trying to do here. Mirror Guard, who I didn't spot before, thought those were just more Forsaken, actually, even in the battle, but we're going to blast him from behind this nice little repositioned position with the Outriders. How about that? That's one of the reasons why I favor Outriders over handguns. And wagons don't bleed models in the same way. They also shoot 360. They do not have the same burst, I will admit, as handguns. Handguns do have a good amount of burst if you can focus fire with several of them on a single unit. They do have a pretty long reload time, though. But still, we're going to get some great damage in on this Manticore. In a build like this, I can just have a ton of them. And how about Foot Carl and Felix? We have not talked about this, but I'm going to probably make a video at a later date about this duo if it continues to be successful for me. Kind of a fun little buddy flick, Felix and Franz. Potentially pretty strong. Franz on foot right now I actually need to mess around more with. He just seems like, I mean, he's got pretty good stats all around and weapon strength and everything. Not great HP, but you can kind of supplement that with some other means. Maybe throw a Warrior Priest in there instead of Felix for the damage resistance, although Felix, if you bring Helping Hands, can give damage resistance and healing, which is just really competitive. Yeah, though he himself is an okay character. He's not amazing. My Amethyst Wizard, I don't know that I've really casted many spells with him, and I'm gonna be honest, haven't mostly forgotten about him this game, but we've managed to hold this backline for the most part with my kind of spear wall here. Halberds trading decently with the Mirror Guard, as they're pretty tattered here. Halberds, I'm a huge fan of now at 550. I think the changes they gave them were really good, definitely what they needed, but Rider Rohan here, credit to him, he has somehow engaged like 4 units at once with these Chosen with Halberds, which is honestly really impressive. Yeah, a little bit frustrating for me, but wow, these handguns I do manage to finally disengage. These ones have been getting some good pot shots there, but the Manticore drops once again. But at this point, the 2 Outriders are still basically completely healthy and fully online here. Managed to enrage that Manticore, which is going to not turn out great for them. Some Forsaken also kind of chasing them around a little bit, but the handgunners, the fact I had 4, they were kind of spaced out a little bit. They didn't all get immediately terrified off the side. I was pretty close to the edge here on Troll Country. It's not a huge map, right, so I don't have a ton of space to route. Thankfully, they did come back, though, and we're able to keep on plinking here. Yeah, Mirror Guard finally stabilizing against those Halberds. They should win out that fight in a long-term engagement, but at this point, Foot Franz and Felix being so healthy is weighing heavily on the balance of power, and me still having the ability to rally a lot of these guns, like a lot of his stuff is kind of starting to shatter here. Manticore's out of control. It's still going after Outriders, which is probably what he wants, honestly, but yeah, does now enrage into Halberds, which is unfortunate. These guys will be able to drag down the beast. This is one of those things that I love about the Empire. A lot of people will say, oh, so you're so boring, you dislike the Empire, like how boring could you be just liking humans? It's like, okay, well, my perspective is, like, if I were to be in this world, just me as I am, you know, regular Joe Blow here, this is kind of the best I could aspire to, honestly, is to be like a professional soldier with a halberd trying to, you know, hold the line against a manticore. And the fact they do and can win and kind of use this combined arm strategy to do so, like, lorefully, I feel like it's really cool. And, yeah, for me to, like, imagine myself in this setting, like, this is definitely where I would be at, for sure. Probably in the gun line somewhere, I'll be honest. Probably would not be with the halberd, but... Oh, yeah, Big Bird eventually getting struck down by foot fronds. And, yeah, it was a fun one, for sure. GG to Ryder Rohan, well played to him. Eventually did get my caster taken out and just about swarmed my lines enough to chase off those handguns. But credit to the halberds and the kind of spear line here. They were able to do enough, you know, keep those handgunners alive. They all basically paid for themselves, one of them twice over, so I have to say, pretty good overall for the handgunners. You'll see me use more often crossbows and, like, I don't know, pistol units, just because they tend to be a little bit cheaper, and you can then spend more on, like, shock cavalry, for example, and some other tools and assets. But something like this is fun to play for me sometimes. Definitely fun to change it up with this kind of massive gun line. And it actually did pretty good. These two Outriders on the left flank definitely got crumped pretty hard in melee engagements with the throwing axes, which is an advantage for throwing axes, definitely. They're also cheaper than Outriders, which is something to consider. If you can get buffs for the Outriders with like a Mobile Franz or, you know, Warrior Priest or something, they'll probably win. Without that, they're definitely going to get crumped by those Horsemen. But the Horsemen overall actually didn't end up paying for themselves too much. One of them did. We were able to manage them fairly well with counterfire and with the halberds and spears. Spears are mostly here to just hold the line, and they did just enough to do that, and actually doing some okay damage. Felix didn't really do a lot other than heal Franz, who himself got 2,300 damage value. I forget exactly how much he costs on this foot loadout. We can look at that in just a second here. But yeah, the handguns were kind of the main piece here. I was trying out, and they did decently. Looking at the rest of Ryder Rohan's build, try saying that 5 times fast. The Marauders, pretty cost-effective here. Forsaken, maybe not so much. Honestly, just cutting these 2 Forsaken for 2 more Marauders, or even Marauder for great weapons if you want to have support for cavalry engagements, wouldn't be a bad idea. I actually think just Marauder spam would have been harder for me to deal with, considering I kind of had a lot of anti-armor tools specifically. As a result, these armored units kind of got blasted. The great weapons, the halberds, the Forsaken, all just getting blasted. Mirror Guard also. The Manticores, despite everything, almost ended up paying for themselves. Even though they didn't do much damage value, if they had been able to fully terrify off all my handgunners, that would have absolutely paid for themselves. But yeah, Big Bird doing okay as well. Maybe not so great in terms of damage value, but I was honestly pretty surprised at how well Foot Franz and Felix were able to do. I mean, granted, they were basically always with spear and halberd support, which is how I would strongly advise you play them. And I don't know, if your opponent goes for like an air snipe, it could be potentially a lot harder to protect Foot Franz. But, I mean, 45 melee defense plus 5 with hold the line. You're going to be at 50 base, right? You have plus stand your ground and Reichel and Runefang, which not only hits Franz, but hits everyone around him. Almost 2,000 points, which is pretty expensive for a foot character without healing. But, I mean, Felix with no abilities at all is pretty cheap, only 800 points. And, again, he provides just healing, or if you want to pay 1037, you can get Helping Hands for additional melee attack and damage resistance. A little tongue-tied today, sorry guys. But anyway, I didn't even bring the Silver Bullets Regiment of Renown. I can briefly talk about them here in terms of a unit. I'll probably do a specific highlight on them, but they get extra magic damage, plus 5 range, better reload time, and of course the Regiment of Renown status, you know, extra stats, and of course stock as well, which is really, really nice for any missile unit. But handgunners in general, so the missile damage on paper actually isn't amazing, but that's mostly due to a long reload time. 17 armor-piercing missile damage is pretty good, but you kind of compare that to some other similarly priced armor-piercing gun units would be obviously the best comparison. I recently talked about Thunderers. You can check that video out. If you have not seen it, definitely would recommend, but Thunderers, I'd say they're just a little bit better overall. I mean, they have more HP, actually less HP, I guess because 8 less models. But better stats in every way, including armor in particular, 60 extra armor up to 80, and a missile block chance. They trade better in just about every engagement, not to mention they've got magic resistance as their dwarfs, much heavier mass. I mean, just in every way superior to handgunners, and only for 100 points more, so I would definitely rank Thunders in general above. Zombies, on the other hand, are cheaper, 50 points cheaper. They have more models. What is that? 22 more models? And they deal even just 1 less missile damage over 10 seconds, 17 and 5, which I believe is actually the same. I want to say they just have a little bit longer, longer of a reload time, but unlike Coast, Empire has no reload time buffs right now. I'm really hoping, and I'm probably going to put together like a DLC pitch video about this at some point. I'm really hoping for Empire Engineer character at some point to give extra reload time. And I mean, I guess that's not 100% true. You do have on the Huntsman reload skill, 30 reload skill, which is actually pretty nice, and flaming damage. Could be decent for handgunners, but I don't know. Huntsman General is just a meme lord choice, to be honest. The Hunt's Master himself, I don't think he actually has any reload skill buffs. Yeah, he does not, which is unfortunate. So because you're limited to only this one character with reload skill buffs, like either as a lord or as a hero, personally I would prefer as a lord, and this is getting on a tangent, but mostly just because he could have a steam tank mount, and then we have a steam tank lord. But anyway, Empire Engineer as a lord choice. If he did have a steam tank mount, you could park that steam tank, just behind the handgunners, and give him a nice reload skill buff. But Vampire Coast, on the other hand, you have, Gunnery Whites have one, I believe. It's not super often you use this, but it is pretty awesome, actually. Plus 20 reload skill and accuracy. Not to mention they can give extra ammo, be healed, they're undead. I mean, they are worse stats than handgunners, right? The zombie handguns. They do have a pretty cool ROR as well, in my opinion. Actually, just the theme of these guys, I know I talked about the Queen earlier, this week. These guys, the fact they have bayonets, personally, I just really like it. It's actually not super strong considering how much more expensive they are, and they're still not great in combat, although 20 melee attack is not terrible. It's just bad. It's not terrible. But anyway, kind of getting off track here, but zombie handguns, I would still rank above handgunners just because they're cheaper. More models equals more DPS at the end of the day, and they have kind of better missile-specific support, although they don't have as good a nets. That's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but anyway. Maybe that's what some of you guys come for anyway. In terms of just general other kind of mid-tier skirmish units, Deepwood Scouts, there's kind of those 360 shooting like Deepwood Scouts and Chameleon Skinks. They're just arguably better in that they have more utility. There's the cheaper ones, even on Empire's own roster, like I mentioned, crossbows I'm a fan of right now because they can fire in an arc. They're much cheaper, and they still have decent AP. Not to mention you have good armor centering abilities with either Balthazar, a Witch Hunter also. You can take, Lure of Death. There's some other ways you can do that. Curse the Midnight Wind. Lure of Heaven's honestly very underrated for Empire. Free Company Militia, likewise. They have more models, much better melee stats, and matchup where you're going to face summons, these guys are going to be able to defend themselves better, and the best ability is availability. If your handgunners are dead, they're not doing you anything, right? So, I guess this is my essay on why I'm not the biggest fan of handgunners. They're still a good unit, don't get me wrong. You shouldn't take this to mean that they're a bad unit. I just personally don't use them a ton, and that, hopefully you understand why, but still, awesome. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.